Hi, my name is Keegan and we are here in my studio in Los Angeles, and I want to show you how to use, actually how to create and use a ferrous indigo vat. If you have purchased anything from me directly, this is the recipe that I have. So you may have either gotten a vat ingredients like this, or you got a kit like this. If you don't have either of these things, you can actually follow along with this recipe as long as you source the ingredients, and I'll go through those when we're doing it. So. First thing first, I'm going to turn this water off. I start with water at a boil, so I'm going to be adding all of my ingredients to water that was just previously boiling. It doesn't need to stay boiling. This has just been at a simmer. I'm just cutting off the heat, and then we'll just work right in there. So I'm going to show you the ingredients here. Actually, I'll open up the kit. So this is a dye kit that has all the ingredients to create an indigo vat. So I actually designed this kit maybe 8 years ago, and it has my favorite vat recipe in it. The Ferrous Vat, as it's called, is super easy to use, lasts a long time, you can dye a lot of stuff in it, easy to maintain, you don't have to heat it except when you start it. So I'm going to show you how I mix this up. So inside this kit, we've got a bandana, we've got some sticks, and then we have all the other ingredients for activating the vat. So the big three we are going to start with here are the indigo, the iron, and the lime. So the indigo is where all the color is. The lime, this is actually a sort of burnt type of limestone, and then it's been rehydrated into a product called slaked lime. It's not wet, it's dry, that's just what it's called. So this will change the pH of the liquid that we're starting with. So we're going to have what's called a vat, and inside the vat the pH is going to be very elevated. So once we mix this vat up, you don't actually want to put your hands into it just because it's going to be super alkaline. But we're going to start with the iron. The iron and the lime act together to activate the indigo. So the iron is actually just a water-soluble form of iron. It's called a Ferrous Sulfate heptahydrate, and so this will actually totally dissolve in water. It will become essentially a rusty colored liquid here. Actually, let me scoop this over. Pop those there. So, this is a little pot that I use for a lot of things. This is about 2.5 quarts of water, and it has come to a boil. This is just tap water. If you have rainwater, you can use rainwater. So, safety concerns for the iron and the lime: don't inhale the dust, don't eat the powders, but I'm going to start by doing a very low pour into the pot. So you can see there's it's going to dissolve pretty instantaneously. And the powder was a pale green color, but as soon as it dissolves, it's going to turn orange in this water, and that's just essentially a rust water. And just a few stirs and that'll do it. I don't include a stirring stick in the kit, but literally anything will work. You get a stick from outside, you got an extra gold kitchen spoon, anything's good. You want it to be kind of long because we're actually going to be making a vat, which is a little bit of a deeper container, and so that stick's going to want to be able to hit the bottom. Okay, so the next ingredient I'm going to add is the slaked lime. I'm going to do this gently. I'm going to sort of settle the lime out. Same thing, I don't want to make a lot of dust, so I'm not going to pour this from up high, but I will just gently ease this lime down into the pot. So pouring slowly from a low angle. So you'll see as soon as the lime gets added, it's actually going to modify the iron into a different form, and it'll actually turn green. So you'll have what's called a reduced form of iron. So we are actually creating the conditions where the indigo can be activated. If you were to just take this indigo pigment and put it into water, dip your fabric into that, pull your fabric out, that indigo would not have actually transferred any color onto your fabric. So you literally have to activate the indigo some way, somehow. This is just one of many ways to do it, and it just is the ingredients that I include in my kit. So I recommend this way, but literally, essentially any combination of a reducing agent, which is generally any kind of antioxidant, and a alkaline component, you can create a vat. So, feel free to browse the internet. There's tons of recipes for different styles of vats. This one is just one of the ways. So I'm just stirring this. I want to try to get these, get this lime distributed as evenly as possible. Now, stirring is totally acceptable, but if you want to go ahead and make it super smooth, you don't have to, but I actually have a tool that I use for this process. I have an immersion blender. Not necessary, but a little bit of, it speeds up the process if you do this. When you start with hot water like this for the vat, this will produce your working indigo vat, within probably 20 minutes when you start it to simmer. And then if you blend it, you'll just get a little bit of extra speed and the vat will be a little bit healthier. That said, you do not have to do this, but if you happen to have a utility immersion blender, this is a great time to use it. So just giving things a quick blend. I'm not whipping this, I'm not like holding the blender up here and frothing things in. I'm actually just trying to stir this pot from underneath and break up any little chunks of lime. It's quite fine. Things are pretty well dispersed already. Good enough. Okay. So now we've got our lime, our calcium hydroxide dissolved, and we've got the iron mixed, and so we end up with this green reduced iron calcium compound. On the top you can actually see that there's sort of an orange skin that reforms quite quickly, and that's actually the iron oxidizing in the atmosphere and rusting. So as we brush this off, you can see it's still green underneath, but that top skin starts to go orange. So once you have this is a concentrate. We're not going to be dyeing directly in this amount of liquid. This is not even a gallon. Maybe it's 3 quarts, 2.5, 3 quarts. This is a concentrate. So the reaction is going to happen much more quickly in this space once we add the indigo. We're going to leave it in here for just a couple minutes, and then we're going to add it to another amount of liquid. This kit, either the vat ingredients or my kit, is built to power like 6 or 7 gallons of liquid. So this is a concentrate. You can actually decant this, you can store it in another container, and then when you want to sort of add a little bit of a boost to another vat, you can do that. I'm going to show you how I would mix up about whatever this is. This is maybe 4-gallon vat over here, and we'll do some dyeing in that. So next thing's up, we're just going to put the indigo in. This bottle has indigo paste in it, so it's actually been hydrated already. So this is indigo that's extracted from a plant. It is then kept in a paste form. Indigo, when it dries out, is really hard to rehydrate. And so if you keep it wet, then you're able to put it into a vat and it will reduce essentially immediately. So I have added some pebbles to the bottom of these jars, and so that you can shake it and it will basically agitate everything so that you're able to break up any clumps that might be in there. Sometimes the indigo will settle to the bottom and it needs a little shake. So don't be afraid to give it a good hearty shake for maybe a minute tops is all you'll need to do, and then we're going to pour it right in here. So this is 60 grams of a 10 or 11% indigo. So depending on what you're starting with, if you have one of these bottles, I use the whole thing for this recipe. But if you have an indigo powder that you've acquired from somewhere else, just scale the amount of powder that you need so that you end up with the same amount of liquid. So maybe depends on what concentrate your powder is also. So just know that you don't need a ton of indigo for this vat recipe. Okay, so this is ready to go in. Boom. And you can see as it pours in, it looks blue. You just have that indigo blue color. I'm going to actually top this bottle up a little bit because I want to get all the pigment out of it. And this bottle is actually clear, so I'll do that a couple times. It's getting there. All right, that's more or less good. Good enough. And so you can see the stones in the bottom. I will eventually put the stones into the other container, but I'm just going to hold on to them for now. So now as I stir this, you'll see it's going to start to go darker. And I don't know if it'll come through on video, but pretty soon the sediment color starts to turn to more of a neon-y green. It's quite a bright and vibrant green. And then you can see immediately there's a purple coppery skin on top of the liquid. And that is an indicator that the indigo is reducing. So the indigo that's now dissolved in this liquid is active. So this is essentially ready to dye. We could dip things into here and pull them out. They would get color on them. However, this is entirely full of sediment. So this is full of the iron powder and the lime powder. So we want those to work, but we actually don't want them to get onto the fabric. So when we're dyeing, we're actually going to be creating a larger vat. We're going to let the sediment settle out to the bottom and then dip our fabric into the top of the liquid. So this is about it. Not a fancy thing. Just let this mellow. You can let this sit for maybe 20 minutes or half an hour if you have the luxury. If you don't, like I don't right now, I'm actually going to put this vat concentrate directly into our larger vat container immediately. So, let's see. This is just hot water out of the tap. So this is 3 gallons maybe. I think this is probably a 4-gallon, 16-quart stainless steel pot. I recommend something at least this size if you're going to be producing a vat. Ideally, it's going to be something taller. The taller your vat is, the more success you're going to have with dyeing. Only because it'll give the sediment of the vat an opportunity to settle out to the bottom, and then you'll have a larger column of sort of clear liquid to dye in. So this is kind of the minimum size that I'd recommend. A 5-gallon bucket, plastic bucket, is also totally acceptable. Just be mindful of the temperature when you start. I think it should be fine if you're just using hot water from the tap and then you add a little bit of this previously boiled stuff. Most of those buckets can hold up to that kind of heat. So this is not that expensive of a pot. And in fact, if you're ever shopping for this process, don't even buy a fancy pot. Like it does not matter. All you're trying to do is have a vessel that holds your vat liquid. It doesn't need to be thick walled. You're barely ever gonna heat it if you do. So just a real inexpensive stainless steel is important. If you go for aluminum, the high pH of this vat can actually sort of etch out some of the aluminum from the side walls of the pot, which is not good for your dyeing or for the pot. So if you can find a pot, make sure it is stainless steel. Copper also fine, enameled ware also fine. Wood probably would also work. I don't know if you can find a wood barrel or something, but this is generally pretty available. I literally found this one on the street, but I think that I've seen pots about this size for like 20 to 40 bucks, especially even taller ones. Depends on what you got around where you are. But look for them secondhand, pick up anything that'll hold liquid, but as long as it's stainless steel. So this is, again, just water. I start with hot water because there's less gases dissolved in it. So some of the things that can weaken this indigo vat over time are oxygen and carbon dioxide. So if you start with hotter liquid to begin with, then there's essentially no dissolved gases in there already. So by adding hot liquid to hot liquid, we're going to be able to just start dyeing almost immediately. So this is basically ready to pour. I'm going to go right on in here. Just going to give this a little rinse here, get the most I can out of this. And you can clean indigo off of a stainless steel pot. A little bit of scrubbing, a little bit of baking soda, and you're back to a perfect pot. So I use these for all my different dye recipes. This is not foodware, but I believe it could be. You know, as long as you do a really good job cleaning the indigo off, it's not something that you have to use as exclusively for indigo dyeing. As long as you're working with these ingredients. Some other ingredients are a little nastier, and I wouldn't recommend going back to food. But in this case, this is totally fine. So now you can see I want to stir this up, and I'm trying to stir in a vortex, but I'm not whipping in air. I'm just literally trying to get the liquid moving so that all of that indigo is going to be dispersed. And then I'll gently drag from one side. I don't know if you can even see the color of this liquid. I don't know how it comes through on the camera, but it's pretty dark green. It's a beautiful forest green, but it's very vibrant when I drag the spoon. I'm actually going to put these stones back into this dye pot. It seems a little bit crazy, but they're actually very helpful. So they don't contribute to the dyeing in any way. They don't make the vat healthier, but they are a good indicator for me. So when the stones are in there, I can actually tell when all of the sediment is moving. So this has been, the indigo's been added, the concentrate's been added into this dye pot. This is a very strong vat right here. This is probably only about 3.5, 4 gallons of liquid, but it's using the same amount of indigo that could power a 6 or 7 gallon vat. So you could have just used half of that concentrate to start things off, done a bunch of dyeing, and then you could add the second round of concentrate back in there and have more, do some more dyeing out of the vat. So I'm gonna give it another stir. And this time you'll be able to hear when the pebbles are moving, they're the last thing that moves. So once the sediment settles out, especially after if you leave the vat for a day, 2 days, or like even a month, you can come back to it, give it a stir, and then you'll be able to hear those pebbles moving. And once you hear the pebbles move, then you know that everything else is moving because the pebbles are much heavier than the other sediment. So as I'm stirring this now, that's a sign that all of the sediment at the bottom is moving. So now I'll just drag this to the side. And that causes, I don't know, did you hear the pebbles? They're there. That causes, this is what's often called the bloom or the flower on the indigo vat. And this is essentially just oxidized indigo. You can see I can kind of scoot it around. When you're dyeing, that kind of gets in the way, so you can either scoot it to the side. I will often just like pop it off. So take this little spoon on here, and then I have a little container. I keep this stuff for other things. You can use it as a pigment. But that's that. This vat is essentially ready to dye. The biggest thing I'd want to do is wait for the sediment to settle out some. If you just start dipping into this immediately, which we're going to do, some sediment will cloud onto the pieces and you won't get the purest blue of indigo dips. If you let that sediment settle and then you dye in this upper section, then you're going to get a really crisp, vibrant blue. So I'll do one. I'll do a little demo here. So this is water. I've just been soaking these pieces of fabric. Whatever you're going to dye, I recommend soaking it for, at least a few minutes overnight. If you got overnight, you can just throw that stuff in, and then all your fibers will be very hydrated, and they will actually uptake the color much more readily than if they were dry. I never put anything dry into a dye pot. So this is a really concentrated vat. Behind me, I have a little dipometer. This is a sort of a gauge of how much color you will get with each dip into the Indigo vat. So I'm going to start with the piece of, this is rayon, which is a cellulose-based fiber. So this is has a plant material origin, and so this actually uptakes color really, really beautifully. So this dipometer, you can see each of these steps denotes a single dip in the vat. So indigo is cumulative. You have to dip multiple times to get to a darker color. So over here you can see this is actually, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and this is about 10 dips from there on down. You can keep going and get much more saturated than even what's up here. But this vat that we mixed up is quite concentrated. We're gonna skip like probably right to here for our first dip because this is so strong. So let me glove up. So again, this is super alkaline. If we took a pH test on this, it would be like pH 12 or pH 13. So that is actually going to be quite harsh on your hands. If you were to dip your hand into there, I have dipped in it like when I was, first getting into dyeing. I was into the blue hand look a little bit, but then I realized it was just drying out my hands so much. That alkalinity is not great for your skin health. So now I'm a big glove proponent. I include gloves in the kit. So this is a little bit of rayon. It's been wet. So ideally, you can wait. Once we've mixed this up, once we've stirred it, I actually like to let it sit for about an hour, stir it again, let it sit for another 2 hours, and then it's ready to dye. That's kind of ideal. If you dye in it right now, like we're about to do, you're not going to get the best color. The longer you can let that sediment settle out, then the better color you're going to get. So I'm going to start and open up this piece of fabric here. When I'm dipping, I want to make sure that all of the surface of the fabric has the ability to contact the indigo. So for example, if I just take this piece of fabric, I ball it up and I throw it in there, the compression of it just being balled up, you end up with a lot of surface area inside the folds here that didn't get exposed to the vat, and so those things will actually end up staying white. Only the outer surface is going to get coated with indigo. The dye will get in through a couple layers of fabric, but not that many. So to dye something nice and even, you want to make sure that when you put it into the vat, it's going to stay as open as possible. And ideally, you're not going to hit the bottom of this container. So I'm going to actually take the fabric, I'm going to lower it down in gently and kind of cradle it in my hands, and then I'm going to squeeze the liquid through multiple layers of fabric here to get it to actually penetrate through all of the layers. That way the indigo will have dyed all the way in. And what I'll often do is dip it a little bit, squeeze, pull it out, rearrange it, and then go back in for another dip. So on your first dip, you don't need to go that long, maybe like 30 seconds. But as you want to get darker colors, you're going to have to stretch out your dips. And when you're dipping, you want to try to be as careful as possible with the amount of air that you bring into the vat. There's only so much you can do because you're putting in fabric. But as you go in and as you exit the vat, you want to exit the vat gently as well. So we're going in, I'm going to take this. Going in, I'm going to let that cradle in the hands. I'm going to squeeze this gently. I'm trying to massage the indigo in, but you can see I'm not breaking the surface of the liquid, so I'm not actually allowing the indigo to come up, the fabric to come up above the surface of the liquid. Everything is happening below that top little section. So, okay, probably pretty good for a first dip. This feels very potent. So I'm going to start by squeezing. You can see I actually haven't even lifted my hands out yet. I'm squeezing the fabric to try to get all the liquid out before I even lift it up and out, because I don't want it to drip at all. So I've been squeezing. I'm now gonna raise my hands and then open my hands. And then you can see there's almost no drips. There was like one drip off the glove. And then when I open this up and snap it out, you're gonna see kind of a crazy pattern. That's because it was bound up in my hand. So there's some lighter sections, there's some darker sections. So after this dip, I recommend a rinse. So this is gonna immediately go into this water. So you would think, oh no, I don't wanna rinse it, I don't wanna rinse off the indigo pigment. It's not how it works. So as soon as this hits the water actually helps to oxidize the indigo and it fixes it on the fabric. And it will also rinse off any additional crud from the sediment. So, we got our first dip here. Nice looking first dip. A little bit washy, you know, there's some lighter spots, there's some darker spots, but that's mostly because I was holding it like this. So if you want to get a nice even color, you'd open this thing back up, give it a little snap, and now, yeah, even though it's wet, it's going to be hard to read. I usually sort of use this dipometer and say that you're going to get 2 clicks lighter. So if we line it up to basically where it is, I would say it's about here. We're going to be about here when it dries. So wet indigo and dry indigo have different looks. So I'm going to go back in, get a little more color on this thing. Again, I'm going to scoop the flower off to the side. You don't have to do anything fancy with it, but in we go. And I'm gently opening this fabric up, agitating it continuously. I don't ever just like put something in the vat and walk away. I'm constantly squeezing the dye liquid through it or sort of working it. So here I am opening it. And again, I'm trying not to go too deep in this vat. I want to stay right up near the upper area because I don't want to hit that sediment. The sediment is where all the action is. So you want the sediment to exist. You just don't want your piece of fabric touching it. So here we go. So second dip. Picked up some more color. So again, this can go in the rinse and get another round of what's called oxidation. So this, because it's a wide open piece of fabric, it oxidizes very quickly. It's able to absorb the oxygen that it needs and sort of interact with the atmosphere that we have on our beautiful planet with the fabric, and it will fix the indigo in place. So once that's oxidized, it's ready to go back in the vat and get more color. The visual cue that you have fully oxidized your fabric is that it will be blue. When it comes out of the vat, it's kind of a melange of colors. There's some bluish parts, there's some yellowish parts, there's some greenish parts. You need to let that get all solid blue, and then it will, that's an indication that it's totally oxidized, and you can go back in the vat. So, pretty good looking 2-dipper here. So now this is essentially, I usually like to put at least 3 dips of indigo on something. The more dips it has on there, the more stable the color is. But there you go. Check it out. I want to do a really brief folding demo and just show you just some thoughts about folding. I'm not going to do anything fancy, but I'm going to do it with no gloves on because it's much easier. I'm going to scoot this to the side for now. I got a little piece of silk here, and when you're folding fabric, it's best to actually get it wet first and then wring out as much water as possible. Like, you know, you can literally get as much of this out as you possibly can via wringing. So the fabric is slightly damp, but not wet. If it's wet, it'll be clingy, so I can snap it. So I'm going to do a little stripe thing here, and I'm going to go a little bit freeform. I'm not doing anything crazy. So I'm just going to start gathering this fabric up like this. Creating a sort of pleat thing. And then it's gonna go in the vat. I'm not even gonna tie this. I'm just gonna hold it in my gloved hand. So this is a very low effort pattern making attempt. But the concept is this, that the indigo actually only hits the portions of fabric that are facing out. So the intersections of this piece of fabric are not going to get wet. What I'm going to do is actually dip it and roll it. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to re-wet the silk, dip it here. It's going to be a little group, and I'm going to roll this thing up. So we end up with just like a little nugget. It's been pleated one way and then rolled the other way. So what I'm going to do is actually dip this and just squeeze it. So bringing the vat back in, taking that silk piece, going in not too deep, and again, trying not to be dripping, not to be splashing, but I'm just sort of squeezing my hand. I'm going to repeat, I'll even swap hands here, squeeze it in the other hand for, again, like 30 seconds or so. I'm going to do 2 rounds of this before I open it up so you can actually see what happens. And hopefully we'll get some sort of stripey looking thing here. All right, that's good for a first dip. And again, I'm squeezing the piece before I exit, so you can see as I raise my glove, you get 1, maybe 2 drips. You don't want your piece draining into the vat because that's going to oxidize the vat. Okay, so here we go. Here's our. So I'm saying over here, different rules apply. Like if you want to splash around in your rinse water, that's great. You're going to get a better effect from that because you're going to be able to oxidize your fabric. So you can see on this piece, let's see, if I open up a little bit, I don't know if you'd even be able to tell. No, you can't see it. Never mind. This would have bright green interior if you were to just crack this open. That's because the indigo that has gotten into these inner layers has not oxidized yet. So when you have a wide open piece of fabric, it'll oxidize more quickly. When you have folded up pieces of fabric, you need to give them longer between dips to let them oxidize. In our case, I'm just going to use the water as an oxidizer. So I'm going into the water, I'm squeezing the water out, I'm letting it air out a little bit, back in the water, squeeze it out. So this is probably adequately oxidized, but sometimes you might want to go longer between dips, literally a couple minutes, 3 to 5 minutes. Just set your piece over to the side, try to get as much water out as possible. It will oxidize much more readily when there's no liquid in it, or very little liquid in it. It doesn't need to dry between dips. It only needs to oxidize. And again, oxidizing is just when it turns blue. If it's turned blue, it's ready to go back in the vat. You can get more color on it. So, ready for dip 2, going back in. Again, gently in, working at the top, trying to avoid the sediment here. Massaging the piece, trying to push that liquid in and through. That's about good. Give it another couple seconds here. All right. Rinse. Pull the gloves off. Okay, so this has been dipped 2 times, been rinsed each time, and you can see when we open it up that all those little pleats that I made just from pinching are now all visible. Beautiful little piece, very cute. Ta-da! So now this, you'd want to soak it. Both these pieces, I recommend just sort of forgetting that you did your beautiful indigo dyeing, throwing that into a bucket of water for at least an hour, ideally overnight. You can come back to it then, and then you're gonna wash it. I wash my stuff immediately, so I'll even take it essentially from whatever rinse container it's in, boom, I throw it right in the laundry, treat it like it's a regular piece of laundry, throw in some detergent, wash it on cold. I always do cold cycle for all my indigo dyed things. but I prefer to get them in the mix. If you have a dyed piece like this, you think you did a wonderful job, you take it from here and you immediately put it into your closet, nicely folded up. Sometimes what can happen is you'll actually get atmospheric discharge of the piece. So meaning that just the air that comes into contact with the indigo will actually strip some of that indigo out. So one of the things you can do to mitigate that is to actually, I usually wash these often with a bar soap. It's kind of an oilier soap, and then hang them dry. And if I'm going to store them for a long time, I'll often throw them into a baggie so they don't have a lot of air exchange. Otherwise, just use them. The more you use them, the more even the color is and the stronger the color will stay. If you actually, and that's, you know, for a short amount of time. You don't want to leave them in the sun. Sun is not your friend, especially early on in the process. Like, you want to have the pieces really dried out in the shade the first time you do it. Don't dry them in the sun, because on the day one of your indigo dyeing, your dye is the weakest it sort of will ever be. So if you were to take this piece, put it out in the sun, dry it like flat with the beautiful sun shining down on it, you can actually accidentally discharge some of that indigo dye. So that's especially true when the fabric is wet and on day one. In later times, when your fabric is dry and it's been on there a while, then you know, you can obviously wear these things outside. You can use it however you want to use it, and the color holds up very well. So what else? I mean, that's the kit. Say you're done dyeing, you dyed all the pieces you wanted to dye for the day. Oh, and you can only shove so much stuff through this vat in a day. Like, you know, I just did 2 pieces, nice color. I would say maybe you can do like 10 per go. Then you actually have to stir the vat. So it's not as though this vat is done now. There's still a ton of indigo. The indigo is very active, but what ends up happening after you do a longer dye session is that you have essentially utilized all of the power that's housed in the upper section of the dye pot, and there's a sediment which is still active. So you want to actually stir up that sediment to redistribute the sort of potency of the vat throughout. So as soon as I'm done dyeing, I will stir the vat, and then it will be ready to dye in again in about 2 hours once that's totally settled back out again. So here's the vat. We just did our dye session. I'm going to give this a stir. The sediment comes back up. You can see, I don't know if you can see, it's green liquid again. And I'm agitating a lot, but I'm trying not to whip in air. So I'm spinning like a little vortex. I'm going to drag the spoon to reform that flour on top. You can hear the pebbles going, which means that all the sediment is going. And now once this settles back out again, you're ready to dye. So you can do that. You can sort of get many dye sessions out of this dye vat. I can't tell you how long is it's going to last, because it's so dependent on how much fabric do you try to put through, how well behaved are you when you're putting the fabric through, how heavyweight is the fabric, how long are your dips. But if you mix up a vat like this, you do a little dye session like we just did. If you want to leave this vat in the corner for a week and not touch it, you can still dye in it. So I would recommend, if you're going to do that, you just do that little stir move that I just did a couple times the day before you want to dye. So say it's coming up to next weekend, you want to dye, you're dyeing the vat some more after just a few little sessions before. Stir the vat like this, in another hour, stir it again, let it settle back out again, and then tomorrow it's going to be ready to dip into. So you can get multiple sessions. Over time, your sediment is going to start to look cruddy, and I have a whole article on my website that's all about sharpening. So basically all that we would end up doing if you wanted to sort of reactivate your vat is mix up more of the same ingredients. We got more indigo, more iron, more lime. Do that in your hot water thing, pour that back into here again, and then you'll have essentially a new fresh vat. Anything else? I feel like that kind of covers it for now. Oh, disposal of the vat. When you're done, all this stuff is definitely, I usually go put it down the toilet just because it's a larger aperture to pour things down. But if you have a septic system, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because it can be quite alkaline. And before you do, I recommend whipping in a lot of air But if you live in a place with a septic system, you probably live in a place that is, you have more outdoor access. So in that case, generally all of the ingredients in here are either sold as or often used as sort of lawn amendments. So the lime will actually help to boost the pH in your soil and make it a little bit more alkaline. And the iron often acts as a greening tool. So many people will even use that same exact product as a lawn greening amendment. So I will often just sort of whip that together and then disperse it over an area. And that'll do it. Thanks for checking it out. If you have any questions about how to use this dye vat or do any dyeing, feel free to reach out to me through my website, grahamkeegan.com, or on Instagram, yesgraham. And thanks for sticking with me on this one. One more thing. When you are not using your vat, keep it covered at all times. You're just going to want to minimize the air exchange between the atmosphere and the liquid inside. So you can keep this topped up with as much liquid as possible. You can add more hot water to this right now and just raise the level if you want to. Otherwise, keep it lidded when it's not in use. Keep that lid nice and tight too. And then whenever you're ready to dye, that's when you'll pull the lid off. Boom, stir it up, lid back on, wait for an hour, then you're good to go. Thanks.